Hello, and welcome back to our continued conversations on all things climate here at the Hub Culture Climate Campus in Belém, an integral part of the climate campus that's part of COP30. We have 4 locations here that are all linked together. Casa Dorada, focused on social impact, the Voice of the Oceans, Casa de Voz Oceanos, focused on ocean work, Celeste Restaurant, focused on finance, and the Hub Floresta, where we are now, which is really covering all of Hub Culture's deeper conversations on COP30 topics. Joining me right now for a conversation on today's topic, oceans, are a group of really great friends now, I would say, who I've gotten to know over the last year as we've deepened the work of the Ocean Climate Fund on oceans governance, and more. The Ocean Climate Fund was founded in 2024 and is a focus from Hub Culture with many different partners to raise more capital for oceans. And that has put us in the sort of sailing sights of many important people working on oceans. And so I'm really glad to have 2 of you back for a repeat conversation. Adriano Quintela from a marine spatial planner working with Oceano Azul in the Azores. You may remember that I went to visit him last summer in the Azores for an incredible visit. David Schurmann, who's the filmmaker and also the voice and the power behind Casa de Voz Oceanos here, the voice of the oceans, and a really incredible personality for many Brazilian people and people around the world who followed his adventures and his family's adventures all over the world. And my new friend, Will Mclintock, who has been a WhatsApp and email friend over the last few months as we talked about his incredible work as a marine scientist and marine spatial planner. So welcome, gentlemen. We have a little bit of a mantle here, but we're going to have to get through that. Welcome back to Hub, and thanks for taking some time out of your busy time at COP30 to join us. I'd love to just kind of segment this conversation into 3 areas. With Adriano, we're going to talk a little bit about marine protected areas and the growth of that. With David, it's really, I think, going to be about the voice of communications and the work that you're doing to give voice to the ocean to millions of people. And as I understood just now, 25,000 people who've been through your doors.
25 since the 5th, yes.
Yeah, incredible. You guys have been busy, and you're right next door. And Will, really ocean data and the importance of ocean data in a climate that is actually trying to restrict that. So those are going to be the 3 areas that we kind of start off on. Why don't we begin with David on communications? Tell us about the house, part of the climate campus, and you guys have really nailed it over there. It's an incredible thing. I got to have a tour on the boat yesterday, which was really fun. I got to meet your brother and your mother and your father. Give us a little bit of the story of Voice of the Oceans and how did the house happen?
Well, we are a sailing family. We've been sailing around the world for the last 41 years. I was raised on a sailboat for a long time. And after about 30 years sailing around the world, we started noticing the difference that 30 years before that the oceans was going through. A lot to do with plastic pollution in the oceans, raising sea levels, whitening of the corals, and we started saying we have to do something about it. Our family for the last 41 years have been doing documentaries on our expeditions around the world, mostly focused on adventure and culture. So when we got back from our 3rd round-the-world expedition, we decided that it was time to give back, to do something for the oceans. And that's when we came together as a family and as a group and started thinking, what can we do? There are already some amazing people doing some great work like Oceano Azul, like Sea Shepherd, WWF, Oceana, Greenpeace. And we said, is there space for another NGO to come in and try and help that? And for 2.5 years, we learned about the environment because we were sailors, we were eyewitnesses, but we did not have the knowledge, the scientific knowledge behind it. So we dove in for 2.5 years, learned, and understood that, especially in Brazil, the ocean wasn't mainstream. I should say, people in Brazil love the ocean. They love the beach, right? But they did not know anything really about the ocean and its perils and what's going through. And so that's when we set up Voice of the Ocean. After 2.5 years, we are brand new. We are 4 years old as an institution, but we had a big impact in the last 4 years. Especially, one of our main pillars is awareness. and we use the soft power, which today I think is an extremely powerful power to get the message across. So through the media, through the television, through online media, obviously, through the exposition. That's when we came up with the Casa Vozes Oceanos idea. We said when we were invited by the UN, by COP, by the government to come to COP, we said we can do two things. One is we're going to arrive from our fourth around the world expedition in Belém. So that was a big thing.
And I understand from your brother that the boat arrived coming all the way from New Zealand in just a few days before COP began.
Yeah, they were in January there in New Zealand. So they crossed 2 oceans and half around the world expedition to be here for Belém. And that was one of the first things we decided. And then we decided to build a house or, equip the house so that the local people have also an experience in the house. So we wanted to do something that was inclusive. We know how, COP can be, divided in different areas. The blue areas, we understand, we have all the delegations there, the government, and we have the green area. And then we thought we should have the free zone, but a free zone where people can really have access to, freely. And so we set up our exposition that we already have that travels Brazil, that's immersive. We set up in the Casa das 11 Janelas right next door, which is a very big museum. We set up a whole cinema with a projector that's one of the best in the world, that is sponsored by Netflix. And then we wanted a lounge for people to get out of the blue zone and go to a place to relax and see the most beautiful sunset, which is right up here in front.
I've enjoyed it with you there.
And we wanted to set it up there, and so we had another sponsor, Corona, that came on board, and that became a whole complex and an experience, as well as the boat. We opened for public viewing.
And can I just say, the boat's amazing. I mean,
Yeah.
the technology that your family created, like, people don't understand, but your family built this boat, and you used the many lessons that you learned sailing around the world. There's solar, there's like a little garden that floats off the back. There's the most incredible water treatment system. There's a glass crusher that powderizes like hundreds of bottles of glass into essentially sand. I mean, you guys really thought of everything on this boat. It's amazing.
We wanted the boat to be an example that we could travel around the world and show that you can have a minimum footprint, in nature. And on a sailboat, which is a lot harder than doing it on a house, for example. So if you have the investment and the technology, you can actually have a very small footprint. And that's what we wanted to prove and show. And the boat looks like new, but it's actually 10 years old. So for 10 years, our footprint has been the lowest possible. And I think we always talk about, showing, but you have to be doing it as well. It's not just talking about it and showing to people, but we are doing and we're living and we're proof that that can happen. So that's one of the big things with Voice of the Ocean. Just to end here, what it's all about. We work with the soft power to get, especially in Brazil right now. We want to go worldwide, but get people excited about the ocean. Show its importance, because if you can imagine, you have seen it here. Brazil is a country that is very worried about the Amazon, the green Amazon, which is great. It's fantastic. We have a whole blue Amazon that's really not talked about as much as the green Amazon. So we're really fighting to get the blue Amazon into the conversation. Then very quickly, we also help scientific projects. So with the University of São Paulo, Professor Turra, we helped structure an expedition and find the financing for it so that they could do the expedition and then continue on with the studies. And we're going to have the first data coming out of that study of microplastic. We're going to have the first map of microplastics in the coast of Brazil coming out with a scientific study.
Wow, amazing. And speaking of data, let's jump over to Will. You're a marine scientist. You created a technology out of your base in Santa Barbara called Seasketch. I've seen it. It's really amazing. And by the way, congratulations, because I think this is one of those underpinning things that is driving one of the most important things that the fund has identified that we need to do for oceans, which is marine protected areas. So we're going to loop back around to Adriano in a minute on the MPAs. But your technology is helping decide how MPAs get created, where they get created, and how they focus on. So can you tell us a little bit about your work as a marine scientist, and tell us about Seasketch?
Sure. So thanks for having me here. This is great. So the technology that comes out of my lab, Seasketch, is really kind of the culmination of experience that I've had over the last 25 years, dating back to 2000 when the state of California passed a law, the Marine Life Protection Act, which mandated the establishment of a network of marine protected areas in California. And importantly, they had to be based in science, so scientific data, and they had to reflect public opinion and stakeholder input. The trick was, back then, things have changed now, thankfully, but back then, really, the people who we imagined were the ones that ought to be in the room making those decisions were experts, scientists, with the information, and with the tools and the modeling, so forth, that allowed them to make use of that data to then make decisions on where marine protected areas should go. So the data, we're talking data, in this sense, we're talking about maps of habitats on the seafloor, kelp maps, mangrove maps, not mangroves in California, but that kind of thing, habitat maps, alongside administrative boundaries and things like human use data. Where do people go? How do they use ocean space? The data we had back then, and still now, that tends to be kind of more common are the habitat data. We have a pretty good information of where the key habitats are in the ocean, especially along the near shore area where it's been mapped. But we don't have a lot of good information on human uses, particularly if you're talking about small-scale fisheries, recreational fishers, even surfers and divers. That information isn't necessarily readily available. So we have to go about collecting this data in a couple different ways and then making it accessible to everyone, including members of the public and non-technical people, so that they can use that information and be part of the conversation about where protected areas should go.
So this is really actually bringing in all these other stakeholders into the process of deciding how a marine protected area gets established?
That's exactly right. And the reason we do that now is twofold. First, it's sort of our moral imperative to make sure that the people who are affected by these decisions for where MPA should go, that they should be involved in the conversation. But also simply because if you don't properly include people, all the non-technical people in the conversation, the chances are that these laws will not be passed, they will not be accepted by the general public. So we need to, and we've seen that over and over again. If we don't properly involve people in the discussion early on and incorporate their values and not local knowledge, the plans fail. So on the other hand, and I think what you'll hear about from Adriano, hopefully, is that when you do properly engage stakeholders, provide them with the systems that give them access to all the data and the tools to properly draw and analyze protected areas, then it will lead to huge successes.
Well, that's a great segue to Adriano, because one of my big takeaways from our time this summer in the Azores was that idea of participatory inclusion from so many different stakeholders. And if you're interested to hear that, you can refer back to that Azores podcast from the Chronicles. Give us that picture, Adriano. How is that technique and that approach paying off for the Azores today?
Thank you very much for the invitation and for the opportunity to explain a little bit about the Blue Azores process. So just as a context, we created the largest MPA network of the North Atlantic with roughly 300,000 square kilometers, more or less the size of Italy. Half of these protected areas are fully protected, and the other half is highly protected, meaning that only very low impact extractive activities will be allowed inside. And for the sake of the conversation, the reason why we were able to succeed was exactly by involving people into the discussion since the beginning. Not only drawing lines on the maps, but also gathering information, because the thing that I hear the most is that we don't have enough data. And the fact is that when you don't have data, where you should go and ask? It's actually the people that live with the sea that have this information. And this is exactly what Seasketch does. Basically, we can ask people where they use the space, with which importance they use it. And this is crucial for a planner, because you can focus The trade-offs is just on the areas that are conflicting with the natural values. And this is what we accomplish in the Azores. Just to give you an example, in the Azores we mapped the natural values, we mapped the uses and activities, and then we start by having specific conservation objectives defined. We started negotiating with stakeholders, actually hands on deck with the Seasketch, trying to figure out where to put the marine protected areas in order to achieve those specific conservation objectives, minimizing as much as possible the impact on their activity. And this was crucial because in the end, as Will said, when you engage people since the beginning, the probability of acceptance, of ownership of a plan, is much higher. And this allows people to accept and to acknowledge the areas and respect them. And this was super important. Seasketch, I will say, it's one of those tools that can combine science and local knowledge. And people also, the users, fishers or maritime operators, they acknowledge when they feel that the planners, the decision makers, think that they have something to say and incorporate their knowledge into the plan. And this was crucial for us.
Yeah, fantastic. The progress on, I would say, ocean visibility in the COP process seems like it's been growing. Would you guys agree with that statement? And where do you stand on the fact that we're trying, or we, when I say we, it's a royal we, but there are efforts to try to include passages around oceans in this declaration for COP. What would be your hopes to see come out of this COP for oceans as we go into the quote-unquote ocean COP, which will happen somewhere, either Australia or Turkey next year? Let's maybe continue with Adriano and then we'll come down.
It's not the first time that we have this hope, and all of, the last COPs, this hope was not achieved. But in fact, this one is where we have the highest probability and expectation that this might have, not only because we have a great special envoy for the ocean that is doing a great job trying to push the oceans into the agenda. And I've heard this before, and I will say here, because I truly believe that we all should have Marina Scherer as a special envoy for the ocean in every COP. And the fact is that she's doing a great job, and our expectations is that in the final, the ocean will be recognized as a solution for climate, because without the healthy ocean, there's no chance.
And Adriano, do you have a sense of what Marina is proposing or pushing for? Are there any specific things that should be the targets we should be all pushing for?
Well, she's bringing the conversation about the ocean into everything, a single room. She's organizing events. She's putting the ocean in a lot of events and trying to put the ocean in every discussion. So this is, but of course, in the end, it's the decision makers that will need to bring forward. But as we saw in Brazil, and this was something for me surprising and special to see, is that people are actually demanding for the ocean to be part of the equation. This is an opportunity we cannot put aside.
Well, I think we have David to thank a little bit for that as well, because you have really helped to elevate the general conversation. I know that Paul Watson was with you guys last night, and you've had other, Sylvia Earle and some other great voices who are advocates. And it's great to see a house dedicated to oceans, so thank you for that. What would you like to see coming out of this process?
Well, I think I share the same optimism that I think the oceans are being discussed, because once, you might get a few people that are talking about it, but once you get the momentum going, and we have Marinês, that it's amazing, and we have all the NGOs coming together, and then you have the public that begins to have it's starting to have a bigger awareness of what the importance of the ocean is to our lives, because that's the whole thing. For 25, 30 years, we've been talking about forests, and now we are achieving things for forests, like on this COP, obviously here, even being in the Amazonian region, is already quite amazing. So we are, I think, a little bit behind in telling people the importance, but once you get the general population also pressuring, the decision makers, then it becomes something that it's a momentum. It's not one person fighting, but a whole group fighting behind it. And I think what I loved to see here at COP was this alliance of all the NGOs. I mean, on the Casa Voz dos Oceanos, we have 50 NGOs focused on the oceans, from Brazil and international, that are coming in with content, coming in with discussions, and then going to the green and blue zones and talking about that. So I think when you have the momentum happening, being included as one of the important, I think one of the most important spearheaded facts for climate change, which people don't know about. I think that's what I hope is that we get included and we get the discussion going, that it should have been done a long time ago. And I share the same optimism because I have seen it here, that people are reacting positive to it.
Will?
Well, I hate going last because it seems like they took all the words right out of my mouth, you guys. But I guess I'll just repeat a couple of things. I also find a lot of optimism in the fact that there is a special envoy for the ocean, and that I've heard her pushing a lot for some of the same kinds of things I just mentioned, which is the importance of incorporating local knowledge and engaging local people and indigenous people in the discussion around where marine protected areas and where marine spatial planning occurs. So we know, she's making it very clear that the ocean is perhaps the most important solution to climate stabilization, with all of its ecosystem services available to us. But in order to properly do the kinds of spatial planning that leads us to maximize the use of these sustainable ocean resources and activities, we really have to ensure that everybody has to be at the table. And that's a theme that's not just Marinés Scherer saying. I hear it again and again and again, places where I'm in the meetings I'm involved in here. So that agenda of working with ensuring local knowledge and values are reflected in our marine plans is a common theme and a very hopeful theme.
I just want to add one last thing, because we always hear about local knowledge and the coastal people. One of our biggest work is getting people that are far away from the ocean excited about the ocean. Because I think there's a little misconception that it's just the local coastal people that are responsible. Obviously, they are the most to lose. But when we talk about marine pollution, we all know that marine pollution does not come from coastal places. It normally comes down the river from big centers. So one of our works, and I always tell people, I don't want to talk to people that already love the ocean. I want to talk to people that don't know anything about the ocean in landlocked states in Brazil, for example. That's one big work that we are really trying to get off the ground. And I think that's something that we all should work together to do, is trying to get people that are far away from the ocean excited about the ocean. Because then we start, it's all effect, it's all cause and effect. So I love that we're, looking after the communities on the ocean, but we should talk about, the river communities and the big centers in Brazil, like a city like São Paulo. What it generates of pollution and what comes down to the ocean is quite large.
In June, the UN Ocean Conference happened in France, and the Ocean Climate Fund released a strategy for its investment roadmap, which is focused on 3 areas. The first was creating open ocean data, for essentially open source data, to help ensure a safety net for ocean data and to build methods of interoperability. The second area was what we call blue living carbon, which is really like looking at nature-based solutions. And when we say that, it could be seagrasses and mangroves, and trying to build business models around those things to drive protection. And then the third area was blue circular economy and infrastructure, which is a really big area, because as we start to face a world of adaptation, which seems to be the other really interesting thing that's happening right now, is this move away from prevention, and even there are dangers or risks of abandoning the 1.5 target, the 1.5 degrees target. And then now everyone's beginning to really talk about adaptation. And oceans are actually really central to adaptation. In fact, they might be like super, super central because so many populations actually do live close to the sea. And if we have major sea level rise, we're going to see a need for major redevelopment. So our first investment, which we are announcing here at COP, is into blue circular economy infrastructure. And we're working with the Reef Line in Miami, which have just dropped the first artificial reef into the water there to build a sustainable tourism model that is also designed to regrow coral. And so we're going to be working with them on commissioning the designs of new products that we call reef tiles that will be able to attach to sea walls and then be able to host coral and marine life. And the goal is that with these technologies, you can start to turn every seawall into a living reef. So that's kind of exciting for us. But all these things around adaptation plus data are, I think, really central to the conversation now. And so I'd like to bring this back to Will. You're a marine scientist. You're actually out there in the data world. Can you talk to us about some of the signals that we're seeing from the ocean and what those signals are pointing toward?
To be honest, I'm less that kind of a marine scientist. I'm more of a geographer and a social scientist who can tell you sort of how people are using ocean space. So maybe the signal that we see from people is as they've been fishing over the last 40 years, they have seen fewer and smaller fish in their catch, right? They'll all, practically everybody will say, I used to catch fish this big, now I'm catching them this big. And part of that has to do with just changing ecosystems, bleaching corals and so on. A lot of it has to do with overfishing. There's very real human experience to let us know things are changing. Mm-hmm. And then there's the sort of the mapped data that we're getting from satellites and from doing side scan sonar and photographic kind of imagery to understand how things are changing as well. I'll leave it there.
Okay. I mean, I do think there's quite a bit of evidence that we're seeing about sea level temperature rise, right, especially surface level temperatures. We see the massive bleaching events that are happening. We're seeing stronger storms that potentially are coming from warmer water.
For sure. All these things are true. Not my bailiwick, not my, my role in all of this is to collect the data that sort of information can be represented and make it available to decision makers. I'm not necessarily an expert on all the data themselves, right? More of a technologist in that way.
Yeah. Is all of that data informing the way that MPAs are being designed?
It is, and the way that they are is by putting them all together into what we refer to as a data intermediary, right? So this data exists. We know that the ocean habitats are changing and that it's been mapped. But that information is often siloed in academic departments or in government agencies. And everybody's a little protective about how it's used and where it's used, what it's used for, and whether or not they're going to be properly cited. The nice thing about a data intermediary like Seasketch is that you can start to pull these data sets in from where they are made available, expose them in public ways, because it's a web-based platform, it's available to anybody with a computer, and then start showing people where the data gaps are. And when you do this, and I know they've done this in Brazil, when you start to show people what data have been shared, the people who have not yet shared their information, often academics, start to say, wait a minute, you're missing information there. I've got data, let me put that data into the system.
Interesting. So it's sort of like completing a picture, but you got to have the outlines of the picture to know what's missing?
Precisely. Very
interesting. Adriano, one of the big points of a marine protected area is to protect marine life. I had, again, such a great time with you in the Azores, and we were looking at the Seasketch data and the models, and one of the things that you talked to me about was sea life around seamounts and how these seamounts that exist in the Azores are really these kind of not just nurseries, but just bastions of life. And the Azores is a place that actually really still has a lot of abundant marine life. Can you talk to us a little bit about how the MPA's early days are affecting what you're seeing?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, we are talking about volcanic islands in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, in the mid-Atlantic ridge. So the water depth is really big. But we have huge mountain systems underwater, the seamounts, that we were able to protect 75% of them through our network. I just want to mention something that I haven't before, which is our approach was a little bit different because we don't think that we are protecting 30% of the Azores Sea. We are protecting 100% by creating 30% marine protected areas, because the idea was to create a network, and we have objectives of connectivity, for example. We also have objectives of climate change. For example, we identify areas of refugia that are refugia now, and it will continue to be in the future through the climate models. We were able to see where the species will move, and the areas where they will be refugia in the future, 100 years from now, for example, but they were selected to be part of the network in a way that it could create benefits not only just for the areas, but for the entire maritime space of the Azores. And we created the network in once. Normally, marine protected areas are considered one by one, and they lack a little bit of connectivity between them. And this is important for a marine protected area, because we are trying to create a safe place for species that can travel from one place to another, and then by the spillover effect, we could actually create ecological benefits, not just for the areas, but for the entire maritime space of the Azores. We're talking about the seamounts, and of course, it's an amazing ecosystem, because it creates this upwelling, normally in areas with very low productivity, which is the case of oceanic islands, and it aggregates marine life, normally big megafauna, migratory species such as shark whales and whales and dolphins and tuna, which is one of the species that we have many species of tuna, one of the main economic sectors in the fishing in the Azores. And the fact is that, as Will said, we can see decreases in the catchability, we see decreases in the number of fish, abundances, and we need to do something. And even the fishermen, they know this. They know that their parents have a picture inside in the water, and they see what they have now. So the choice was easy. We know how it was in the past. We know how it is now. It's up to you to decide what you want, what you're going to go for the future. And the fact is that the higher the level of protection, the fastest and the bigger is the capability of the marine protected area to recover. And we've seen this recovery in many places. I'm just remembering Cabo Pulmo in Mexico was amazing, because it was completely destroyed, low life. And then all of a sudden, with the marine protected area, everybody is happy. Fishermen are happy, tourist operators are happy, the population is happy. So with the marine protected area, you can actually drive a change in the society.
I wonder if I might ask Adriano a question.
Please.
So it's a pretty optimistic picture you're painting, and I think the reality is that not all fishers are going to be immediately happy with where marine protected areas should go, right? So how do you deal with that in the Azores?
So basically, yeah, of course, there's always, I believe that in planning, if you do planning right, there's always controversy. I mean, if you're protecting the right places, there's always people that's not going to be happy. And we do a lot of communication, trying to explain what this could bring as a benefit. we work a lot with schools, with kids. So we have a program called Educate for a Blue Generation that brings the ocean contents to the daily lives of the students. And yeah, we are trying to make a change in the society. Of course, some people are afraid, and changes are always hard to be accepted, and sometimes.
And once the MPAs are established, do you see any immediate impacts to fishers? I mean, are there some of them put out of business?
To be honest, science, as far as we know, don't actually. There's a paper of Mark Costello recently that analyzes dozens of papers worldwide about marine protected areas. And the fact is that they could not find any negative impact for fishers. They increase captures. So on the other side, there's a lot of benefits. And one of the things I think we were able to do in the Azores is that we were able to change the narrative from costs to investment. So instead of looking into marine protected areas as costs, because costs are always related to the loss, they are starting to be seen as an investment, and actually the smartest investment you can do for our collective future. And when you put the narrative into investments, every investor wants to have the return faster and higher. So that's why strictly protection is the fastest way to have the return from your investment. And
Just one more thing, because I think I'm trying to lead you in a direction, but I'm not sure we're in agreement here. To be sure, when marine protected areas were developed for the state of California, setting aside 15% of our nearshore area, this is 0 to 3 nautical miles, while we did our best to avoid displacing fishers, there were, in fact, even with all the data we had about where they were fishing and where the habitats were, we were all trying to make the trade-offs good for everybody. There were, in fact, squid fishers that were put out of business because no-take areas went over basically the only areas where they could fish. So in the state of California, we didn't have any sort of mechanism to compensate those fishers and make that painful sort of decision palatable. But my understanding is that in the EU, you do have such a thing.
I know where you're trying to get. So yeah, basically we were able with the designation of the areas, and with the next stage, we were able to sign a new memorandum of understanding between the government of the Azores, Oceano Azul Foundation, and Waite Institute, that puts the focus on the implementation phase, management plans, and so on. And with this commitment, we were able to secure a $10 million fund from the environmental fund, from the Portuguese government, to compensate fishers whenever there's the negative impact it's proven. So if there is loss of income in the future, they will have access to this 10 million fund. We call it compensations fund. So basically we were able to secure this money also to help the fishers to adapt to the new reality, because the idea is that you can fish less and get more money for the fish that you get, because if you see, the fisher it's the player that gets the less money on the value chain, and there's space to distribute more equitatively the income through the chain of value.
I think this also highlights the reality that different strokes for different folks, right? I mean, there are 40 million people in California, and just the whole economics of fishing are very different in California than they are in the Azores. So there are going to be local adaptations and approaches that are going to be needed just because different places are different. However, I think the thing that is indisputable is this idea that MPAs, and we've done quite a bit of AI work on this as well, looking at what are the most effective means of ocean investment. And MPAs came out #1 out of all forms of ocean investment as being the most pervasive and comprehensive solution for protecting the oceans. So I think, there may be displacements and we may have to compensate for those displacements, but at the end of the day, it seems like it's one of our best tools in the toolbox, and especially this now growth of the MPAs into the MPA corridors, which you kind of touched on, Adriano. I want to come back to David for a second here. Brazil. The family is going to be sort of back in home waters for the next year. What are your plans for Voice of the Oceans and your work on ocean communications going into the coming year?
Yeah, we have. I just wanted to touch base on the marine protected areas, which I think it's the amazing part is that because they're set in the region, the overflow, what happens around it, that a lot of people don't understand, and that's what the fisheries and everyone gets the benefit from, is, it's not a delimited area. So I think it's a little bit different than sometimes in the forest where it's very straight line. And in marine protected areas, it overflows, it goes out. And so the benefits, and I think Mexico, I read a paper in Mexico that was amazing, that the whole region just benefited from. But coming back to your question, we're going to be with our sailboat finally 4 years after going around the world, coming back to Brazil. We're planning to stay in Brazil this year, where we want to bring a lot of continue work with awareness. Especially in the coast, in the southern part of Brazil, in the coast of Brazil. We want to work between Rio de Janeiro all the way to Florianopolis, where we want to bring a lot of attention. It's an area that it has suffered a lot, from fisheries. It has suffered a lot from pollution, and we want to bring the awareness over. And then we have the Casa Voz dos Oceanos, which is going to be traveling around Brazil.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah, so it's become, we used to have just the exposition, and for us, building the Casa became much more important than just the expo, because we have a place for debates, where we can have local debates, local scientists, local influencers, and people to come and talk and learn about the ocean. We have the exposition that we want, and we also have the lounge. We want to make sure that people come and discover the ocean, not just on a hard talk way, but also in a soft way, so they can enjoy themselves and then have the discussion also in a more informal way. We really believe in that, and so that's the idea, that we'll be traveling around Brazil. We have the first city that has asked for us to go there, which is Curitiba, which got a coast. It's just on the south of Brazil, and they came, they saw, they said, this is amazing. We want to bring it out there. We need to get the awareness going. And then we have 3 other cities and some cities around the world that said, let's bring it out there, because it becomes a whole discussion and not just a nice exposition that you go and you learn. There's actually debate happening. There are scientists that can come. There are, journalists, and we can get the momentum working.
I feel like this kind of ties together. So Will's talking about the fact that you need participatory input for good governance. And then you're talking about getting participatory input for the conversations and to educate people about the importance of the oceans. And then, Adriano, you guys are actually managing this development, not only within the Azores, but exporting your expertise and knowledge to other places around the world that may want to build an MPA and bring these things. And so it feels like all 3 of these threads are really important for supporting the work that needs to be done for oceans. So I want to thank you for that, and continue to do this good work. I do think that there have been a lot of conversations about COP30, where it should be, which part of Brazil, and I think that we're going to leave this week with a deeper understanding of the Amazon, which is really important for people. I think that there's a deeper understanding of the role that oceans play in all of this. And I think that there's some maybe unexpected outcomes that are happening from this collection of people who've gathered in Belém. So I'd like to just finish with one comment from you guys. What's been your biggest surprise this week?
I can start. For me, the biggest surprise was to see how vocal and how active people are regarding the environment as a whole here. People do have something to say here, and they are demanding to be listened. And this, for me, is something I haven't seen in other COPs. It didn't probably happen. And here people are really trying to push their voices into the blue zone. And for me, this is an amazing because it's the populations demanding for decisions, and this is something that might actually lead to some action.
Yeah, I think it's wonderful when a COP happens on a democratic country, that then you can have people come and you really protest, talk about, push. I absolutely love that it was done here. We did hear a lot, and I was asked every day for the last year, is it going to happen in Belém? I said, yes, it's going to happen in Belém. But there's no infrastructure, the prices of the hotels were expensive, everything was difficult. And I said, well, it's a very different part of the world. And we have to understand that the world is different and varied, and not everywhere is going to be like a big city with nice air conditioning and cool, and everybody's going to be sitting in their suits and ties. This is the world. This is the real world. So I love that this COP came down to the real world, because that's where the discussion should be. It shouldn't be just on a nice big room, with fancy, food and cool rooms. We should actually sweat and feel that the world's getting hotter and that these things are real. And also for the indigenous people, I think this is the first time that a COP is done in a place where they have access to, even though it's far away, even though it's expensive and it's hard. There we had, I think, probably the biggest number of indigenous people, especially Brazilian indigenous people, participating. I think that's fantastic. And I think more COPs like this, I think things will move quicker, because then you get the pressure happening.
Yeah, and I just echo both of those statements, and it's encouraging to me to see that it's not just the locals along the coastline that are directly interfacing with the ocean that are starting to show concern for these matters. They are people that are going deeper into the Amazon, and just to emphasize what you were saying earlier. There is a real emphasis on having everybody understand. I'm so glad you're doing this sort of advocacy work. It's important that everybody know that we're all ocean stakeholders. We're all people who are affected by what happens to the ocean. We all consume oxygen, and most of it comes from the ocean, for example. So that message is getting more and more amplified here.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, it's been fun. I thank you guys for joining us. For the rest of you who are here, thanks for tuning in.
Thank you very much.
For those of you who are listening online, thanks for joining. More conversations from the Climate Campus here in Belém, and from the Hub Culture Chronicles, our ongoing podcast series talking about all things in the culture of Hub. Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.